So many years ago, when I was working on my PhD, I discovered something about success in life. I noticed that oftentimes, whether or not you succeed or fail in life, often it has only a little bit of bearing on, it has only a little bit of connection to what you're doing, and it has much more connection to whether you're accepted for what you're doing or not, right? So, my classmates and I had some kind of a teamwork project. It's kind of hard to describe here without getting technical into the computer science that I was working on. But I often beat at a different wavelength than a lot of my peers. I was working in a group of 3 or 4, I want to say, and oftentimes the best ideas would come to me when I'm relaxed, right? When the 3 of us would be at the dining room in the campus, we'd be relaxed on a Saturday taking a walk, and oh my god, the best ideas would come and I would talk to them. They didn't want to listen to that. They were trying to relax. And when we were crammed in the computer lab, I couldn't come up with anything at all. And if I remember correctly, I got a B in that class. My classmates got an A because, quote unquote, I wasn't pulling my weight there. And it just goes to show that whether you succeed or fail is often much more determined by whether or not you're accepted for who you are. And that to this day, 12 years later, I'm still running into trouble like that. I'm gonna have to think hard about whether I move out of the Seattle area. And it's not to say other places don't have prejudices, but some places are more prejudiced toward me and some places are more prejudiced against me. Let me talk about it. So here in Seattle, if you're not in any sort of relationship, you can be in the sexual minority, but if you're solo sexual, there's a lot of prejudice against that, right? So a while ago, I had an upsetting situation in my life, and somebody had broken into my car. There were other things going on too. Well, that time my computer was stolen. I've had times where obviously the pandemic itself was pretty troubling in terms of places that I wanted to go, but people could not relate to the idea of being down because your computer is stolen. So I had to tell all my peers that I just had a broken heart, and I felt terrible having to lie about my situation. I wish I could just say, boss, can I have some space? My computer was stolen 2 days ago. I wish I could do that. I can't here in Seattle. If this were Wallace, Idaho, I probably could, right? And a lot of times here in Seattle, half the grocery store is like organic food, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of prejudice against eating healthier. Right? You go to a party, you refuse food, people just won't invite you again. I mean, they're not going to say that they hate you for not eating crap. They just won't include you anymore. I don't see that happening anywhere else, right? Especially in small town America. In small town America like Wallace, it's impossible to buy organic food. But at the same time, if you go out of your way to do it, people will accept you for who you are, right? You never have to say no to the same food twice, right? Over in Wallace. Now, I've also traveled overseas. So Wallace is one place I'm thinking about relocating to, assuming I can work remotely, or I pick up a career that I can do out of Wallace, right? Which I have thought about. Because like I said, it's not what you do, it's whether or not you get accepted for what you do, right? Now over in Asia, especially Japan, people accept you for being solo sexual. You don't have to have a partner for anything to work in life. I think part of the reason, so we talk about how unaffordable Seattle has become, right? It's even more so if you're solo sexual and you're competing against everybody else who has 2 incomes, right? Oh my god, Seattle is unlivable if you're in that kind of situation, right? That's why here in Seattle, I usually spend about half the year living out of my car, and when it gets really brutal, I'll look for a place. But in Wallace, I wouldn't have to do that because they're not as prejudiced against needing 2 incomes, right? And You're not up against that, right? Over in Japan, it's even better. Their housing is specifically built for one, right? I was in an internet cafe one time in Tokyo. I also stayed in a capsule hotel, right? I bet there are a lot of people who live in those things long term. I mean, just knowing some of the people there while I was there, it gave me an impression some of the people there had been living there for a year or two. And in Taiwan, they're much more accepting of people who are solosexual as well. You have people who live with roommates up until their 40s and 50s. You would never see that here in the United States, right? I wish it was more popular. We all need to make new connections and accept people for who they are. I think part of the reason we hold so much prejudice is because we don't get to see people in these minority groups, right? The one thing I dislike about Taiwan is that they're very obsessed with healthy living, right? So I only get to go to Taiwan 2 or 3 weeks in a year, right? And I haven't gone for 2 years because of the pandemic. Of course I'm going to indulge myself a little bit more when I go to Taiwan, right? Stay up a little bit later than I normally would, maybe eat a little bit more than I normally would. But it's 2 or 3 weeks out of the year. And people like to remark about that. I used to stay with my grandmother when I went to Taiwan, and I learned I can't do that anymore because she remarks so much about it that it really detracts from my enjoyment. Let's say I'm already having a minor binge attack, right, with my favorite fish over in Taiwan. I'm eating a little bit more than I normally would. My grandmother, and besides, it's a lot less expensive over there, right? I can't afford to do that here in the United States, first off, right? And second, some of the food there is not available back home. So of course I'm going to indulge a little bit more than I normally would. My grandmother makes a lot of noise about it. It detracts from the enjoyment, and now I kind of have to binge again just to get the enjoyment out of it. When I wasn't staying with my grandmother, later on I discovered I would stay in a hostel instead of my grandmother's home in Taiwan. I could actually enjoy the initial binge, and I actually finished a lot faster than when I was with I moved on from binging a lot faster than when I was staying with grandmother and she was commenting, right? And I actually did some much more constructive things. But the people at the hostel, they still, the Taiwanese locals there at least, they still comment about how I stay up really late, right? I think I might have been working remotely at the time or doing so, and then I would, obviously, during the day I want to enjoy Taiwan, and they would comment about how unhealthy that was, and that's why I think I had acne all over my face at the time. I was maybe a little bit overweight. They commented on that. Here in the United States, you might not do that. You would comment on people who refuse the junk food, right? I think neither one is right. I think we all need to live and let live, right? So that's Taiwan in a nutshell. They accept people who are solosexual. Lately, they've gotten to accept LGBTQ, which is kind of interesting. I think they started accepting solosexuals long before they accepted LGBTQ. They accept people for their healthy lifestyles, but they pick on people for their unhealthy ones, right? I think even though they accept the sexual minority, I think divorce is very frowned upon in Asia compared to here in the United States, right? I'm not sure if they would accept people who beat on different wavelengths, right? If I had the PhD project over there that I had here in the United States, I'm not sure. They do kind of mingle a lot better. So, for example, just getting to know some of my extended family members, they do seem to be okay with thinking about work outside of work, right? Here in the United States, we tend not to want to do that, right? Just my own experience. Okay, some other places I've traveled. I've traveled to Europe a few times for my conferences, and I want to say that in Europe they're a little bit more accepting of solosexuals compared to here in the United States, especially Western Europe. I think they're a little bit more live and let live. They're more accepting of people who beat on different wavelengths in terms of their lifestyles, I want to say. But I think the problem there is people don't give each other a whole lot of space, right? For example, they see you eating healthy, they might accept it, but they want to learn from you, and as a result, don't give you a whole lot of space there, right? People think that they live in one big family over in Western Europe, especially the Netherlands, which is where most of my experience is from. Now, in Eastern Europe, they don't accept solosexuals as much, I want to say, and they don't accept people for unhealthy lifestyles, just like Taiwan, but not as extreme, I want to say. People do frown upon, especially probably because of financial reasons. If you could afford lots and lots of junk food, there's probably a lot of envy over there. Junk food is pretty expensive over there. The other problem that this one took me by a little bit of surprise when I first traveled to Poland many years ago. Here in the United States, we take for granted that the guy is typically the one who starts a relationship, right? In Poland, I think it's the other way around. It's probably a legacy from World War I, where there are many more girls compared to one guy, right? And it took me by a little bit of surprise. I mean, it sounds like a good thing until you go there and you're hassled by a lot of girls that you might not be interested in, and you don't get accepted for being single, right? Anyways, I'm gonna have to weigh that all in and decide where I want to live eventually, because all of these points are very important to me, right? Be accepted for how I get my work done, be accepted for what I eat, be accepted for my sexual orientation. What else did I talk about? Having personal space not be invaded, right? I discovered that the substrate of where you live your life is sometimes a lot more important than the content of it. Thanks for watching.